Welcome to today's Blueprint News. In this video, we're diving into the latest 338 Canada electoral projection for March 16th, 2025. With Election Day fast approaching, the race is intensifying across the country. From highly contested battlegrounds to clear party strongholds, we'll analyze the latest numbers and trends shaping the electoral map. Who's leading? Who's gaining ground? And which ridings could still flip before Election Day? Let's break it all down. The latest 338 Canada electoral projection, updated on March 16, 2025. Today, we take a closer look at Nunavut, one of Canada's most unique and politically dynamic ridings. Current electoral outlook in Nunavut. According to the latest projections, Nunavut is currently leaning towards the New Democratic Party, NDP. The NDP is polling at 43%, but with a 15% margin of error, meaning their actual support could be significantly higher or lower. This suggests that while they are in the lead, the race is not entirely settled, and voter shifts could still occur. Liberal Party's position. Trailing behind the NDP, the Liberal Party of Canada, LPC, is polling at 31%, with a 14% margin of error. The Liberals have traditionally been strong contenders in Nunavut, having won the riding in past elections. Their support base remains solid, and given the high margin of error, there is still a possibility that they could close the gap and make this a tight race. Conservatives face a decline. The Conservative Party of Canada, CPC, is currently at 20% with a 12% margin of error. What's significant here is the downward trend for the Conservatives, indicated by the symbol in the projection. This suggests that their support has eroded compared to previous polls or past elections. Nunavut has historically not been a conservative stronghold, and unless there is a major shift in campaign messaging or voter priorities, it may be difficult for them to make a breakthrough here. Green Party's minimal presence. The Green Party of Canada, GPC, is polling at just 3% with a 5% margin of error. This indicates that the Greens are not a major factor in this riding, but their presence could still impact the race in minor ways, especially if they attract votes from progressive-leaning electors who might otherwise support the NDP or Liberals. With these numbers, Nunavut remains an NDP-leaning riding, but the high margins of error suggest a degree of uncertainty. The NDP's lead is not necessarily secure, and the Liberals could still make a comeback if voter preferences shift in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, the Conservatives will likely need a stronger campaign effort to gain ground, and the Greens remain a minor player. As we move closer to Election Day, Nunavut will be a key riding to watch, especially given its historical voting patterns and the potential for last-minute shifts. Moving on to the latest 338 Canada electoral projection for the Northwest Territories as of March 16, 2025. Current electoral outlook in the Northwest Territories. According to the latest projections, the Liberal Party of Canada, LPC, is in a strong position, leading with 41% of the vote and an 11% margin of error. This makes the riding Liberal likely, meaning the Liberals have a good chance of holding on to this seat. Additionally, the symbol indicates an upward trend in their support, suggesting that momentum is working in their favor as the election approaches. The Conservative Party of Canada, CPC, is currently polling at 26%, with a 10% margin of error. While the Conservatives are significantly behind the Liberals, they remain competitive, especially if their support continues to grow in the coming weeks. Close behind the Conservatives, the New Democratic Party, NDP, is polling at 25%, with the same 10% margin of error. However, what's important to note here is the symbol next to their percentage. This indicates a declining trend in NDP support, which could be a cause for concern for their campaign. Historically, the NDP has had strong grassroots support in the Northwest Territories, but if their numbers continue to slide, they could fall further behind the Conservatives and struggle to remain competitive. Green Party's presence. The Green Party of Canada, GPC, is polling at 6% with a 6% margin of error. While their influence in this riding is minimal, they could still play a role in vote splitting, particularly among progressive voters who might otherwise support the NDP or Liberals. With the Liberals leading and trending upward, they are in a strong position to retain control of the Northwest Territories. However, the race for second place between the Conservatives and NDP is still competitive, and any further shifts in voter support could impact the final outcome. If the Conservatives manage to gain more ground, they could emerge as the primary challenger to the Liberals, while the NDP will need to reverse their declining trend to stay in the race. As we get closer to election day, this riding will be one to watch for potential movement, particularly between the Conservatives and NDP. Now let's take a look at the latest 338 Canada electoral projection for Yukon as of March 16th, 2025. A tight race in Yukon. Toss-up between Liberals and Conservatives. Yukon is shaping up to be one of the most competitive ridings in the country, with no clear frontrunner at this stage. The Liberal Party of Canada, LPC, is currently leading at 36%, with a 10% margin of error, but their lead is within the statistical margin, making this riding a true toss-up. However, what's working in their favor is the symbol, indicating an upward trend in Liberal support. This suggests that the party is gaining momentum as election day approaches. Right behind them, the Conservative Party of Canada, CPC, is polling at 34%, also with a 10% margin of error. This means the race is extremely close, and a small shift in voter preferences could easily put the Conservatives ahead. Yukon has historically been a swing riding, and this election is proving to be no exception. The final outcome will likely depend on the party's ground game, voter turnout, and any last-minute shifts in public opinion. NDP losing ground, Greens holding steady. Meanwhile, the New Democratic Party, NDP, is polling at 21% with an 8% margin of error. What's notable here is the symbol, indicating that NDP support is declining. While the NDP remains a significant player in Yukon's political landscape, their downward trend suggests they are losing ground to the two leading parties. If this trend continues, the NDP could find it difficult to stay competitive in this tight race. The Green Party of Canada, GPC, is polling at 7% with a 5% margin of error. While they are not expected to be a major factor in determining the winner, their presence could split progressive votes, potentially impacting the overall outcome in this close contest. With both the Liberals and Conservatives in a statistical dead heat, Yukon remains a true toss-up. The Liberals have momentum on their side, but the Conservatives are close behind and could still take the lead. Meanwhile, the NDP will need to stop their declining trend if they want to remain a contender. This is definitely a riding to watch, as even a small swing in voter preferences could decide the outcome. With election day approaching, every vote will count in this tight battle for Yukon. Now let's take a look at the latest 338 Canada electoral projection for British Columbia. As of March 16, 2025, Conservatives lead in British Columbia with growing support. The Conservative Party of Canada, CPC, is currently leading in British Columbia with 41% of the vote and a 6% margin of error. What's important here is the symbol, indicating an upward trend in Conservative support. This suggests that the CPC is gaining momentum in the province, solidifying its position as the frontrunner. If this trend continues, British Columbia could play a crucial role in securing Conservative gains at the national level. Liberals see an upward trend, but trail behind the Liberal Party of Canada, LPC, is polling at 31% with a 5% margin of error. While they are 10 points behind the Conservatives, their symbol indicates a rise in support. This suggests that while the Conservatives have the lead, The Liberals are still in the race and could close the gap if their momentum continues. British Columbia has historically been a competitive battleground, and the Liberal gains could translate into key seat pickups in urban centers like Vancouver. The New Democratic Party, NDP, is currently at 19% with a 4% margin of error. The symbol next to their percentage indicates that their support is declining. This is a significant shift, as the NDP has traditionally been strong in parts of British Columbia, particularly on Vancouver Island and in certain urban areas. If this downward trend continues, the NDP may struggle to hold on to key seats they previously won. The Green Party of Canada, GPC, is polling at 6% with a 3% margin of error. While the Greens have historically had a strong presence in British Columbia, particularly in areas like Saanich Gulf Islands, their current numbers suggest that they are not a major factor in this election. However, their presence could still impact progressive vote splitting, indirectly influencing the Liberal-NDP dynamic. With the Conservatives leading and trending upward, they are well positioned to make significant gains in British Columbia. However, the Liberals are also gaining support, which means the race could tighten in some key ridings. The NDP's decline could further benefit both the Conservatives and Liberals, depending on where their lost votes go. As election day approaches, British Columbia remains a critical battleground, and any shifts in voter support could change the final outcome. Now, let's break down the latest 338 Canada electoral projection for Alberta as of March 16, 2025. Conservatives still dominate Alberta but show signs of decline. The Conservative Party of Canada, CPC, continues to dominate Alberta, polling at 55% with a 6% margin of error. However, the symbol indicates a declining trend in their support. While Alberta remains a conservative stronghold, this dip suggests that some voters may be shifting toward other parties. The question now is whether this downward trend is temporary or the beginning of a more significant shift in Alberta's political landscape. Liberals gaining ground. The Liberal Party of Canada, LPC, is currently at 22% with a 5% margin of error. Notably, the symbol shows that Liberal support is rising. While they are still far behind the Conservatives, any increase in their numbers could help them secure more seats, particularly in urban centers like Calgary and Edmonton, where they have been competitive in past elections. The New Democratic Party, NDP, is polling at 14% with a 4% margin of error. However, their symbol indicates a decline in support. The NDP has historically struggled in Alberta outside of Edmonton, and if this downward trend continues, they may find it even harder to win seats in the province. Meanwhile, the People's Party of Canada, PPC, is polling at just 3%, with a 3% margin of error. Their influence in Alberta remains minimal, suggesting that right-wing voters are largely staying with the Conservatives despite their slight decline. Despite the Conservatives' decline, they are still far ahead of the competition and remain the dominant force in Alberta. However, the Liberals' upward trend could allow them to pick up key ridings, especially in urban areas, while the NDP's weakening support may limit their ability to challenge in progressive pockets of the province. Alberta will continue to be a crucial battleground for the Conservatives to maintain their national seat count. But if the Liberal momentum continues, we could see some surprises in select ridings. Next, let's take a look at the latest 338 Canada electoral projection for the Prairies. As of March 16, 2025, Conservatives maintain a strong lead but face declining support. The Conservative Party of Canada, CPC, continues to dominate the Prairie provinces, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and parts of Alberta, with 48% of the vote, but their symbol indicates a declining trend. With a 6% margin of error, this suggests that while the Conservatives remain the clear front-runners, they are losing some ground compared to previous elections. The big question now is whether this trend will continue, potentially opening the door for opposition parties to make gains. Liberals on the rise but still trailing the Liberal Party of Canada, LPC, is polling at 26% with a 5% margin of error, and they are trending upward. While still well behind the Conservatives, this increase in Liberal support suggests that urban and suburban voters in cities like Winnipeg and Regina may be shifting toward the Liberals. If this momentum continues, it could help the party flip some key ridings. NDP losing support in the region. The New Democratic Party, NDP, is polling at 16% with a 4% margin of error. However, their symbol indicates that their support is slipping. Traditionally, the NDP has had pockets of strength in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, but this downward trend suggests they may be struggling to hold on to key seats. If this continues, they risk losing ground to both the Liberals and Conservatives. Minor parties struggling to gain traction. Both the Green Party of Canada, GPC, and the People's Party of Canada, PPC, are polling at 3% with 2% and 3% margins of error, respectively. These numbers indicate that neither party is a significant factor in the region. However, even a small number of votes going to the PPC could affect Conservative margins in tight races, while Green support could impact progressive vote splitting between the Liberals and NDP. The Conservatives remain dominant, but their declining support suggests some softening of their hold on the region. Meanwhile, the Liberals' rising numbers indicate that they may gain seats in urban areas, while the NDP's downward trend could further weaken their influence in the prairies. With small but noticeable shifts happening, the prairies could see some unexpected results, especially if the Liberal surge continues or the Conservatives fail to stabilize their base. Now let's analyze the latest 338 Canada electoral projection for Ontario as of March 16, 2025. A tight battle between Conservatives and Liberals in Ontario is shaping up to be one of the most crucial battlegrounds in the upcoming election, with the Conservative Party of Canada, CPC, leading at 41%, but with a symbol indicating a declining trend. With a 6% margin of error, the Conservative lead is far from secure, especially with the Liberals gaining ground. The Liberal Party of Canada, LPC, is close behind at 39%, with a 6% margin of error and a symbol showing that their support is rising. This makes Ontario a highly competitive province, where even small voter shifts could tip the balance and determine the final outcome. The New Democratic Party, NDP, is polling at 12% with a 4% margin of error, but their symbol signals a declining trend. This suggests that the NDP is losing support, possibly as progressive voters shift toward the Liberals in an effort to counter the Conservatives. This drop could hurt the NDP's chances in ridings where they've previously been competitive, particularly in parts of Toronto, Hamilton, and Northern Ontario. The Green Party of Canada, GPC, is polling at 4%, while the People's Party of Canada, PPC, is at 3%, both with small margins of error. While neither party is expected to win seats, their presence could influence the final outcome by splitting votes, Greens pulling from Liberals, NDP, and PPC taking from Conservatives. With the Conservatives slipping and the Liberals gaining momentum, Ontario is now a toss-up, and the final outcome will likely come down to urban versus rural voting patterns and last-minute campaign shifts. The NDP's declining support further benefits the Liberals, while smaller parties could play a role in tight races. Ontario remains one of the most important provinces to watch, as its large number of seats could decide the national election outcome. Next, let's take a look at the latest 338 Canada electoral projection for Quebec as of March 16, 2025. Liberals lead in Quebec with growing support. The Liberal Party of Canada, LPC, is leading the race in Quebec with 34% of the vote, holding a 5% margin of error. Notably, their symbol indicates a rising trend, suggesting they are gaining momentum in the province. Quebec has historically been a stronghold for the Liberals, particularly in Montreal and other urban centers, and this latest projection reinforces their continued dominance in key ridings. Bloc Québécois remains a strong contender. In second place, the Bloc Québécois, BQ, is polling at 29% with a 4% margin of error. While the Bloc remains competitive, they are trailing the Liberals by 5 points. Given their historical strength in rural and francophone regions, they still have the potential to gain ground, especially in seats outside Montreal, where nationalist sentiments run high. The Bloc's ability to mobilize its base will be crucial in determining whether they can close the gap with the Liberals. Conservatives struggle to gain ground. The Conservative Party of Canada, CPC, sits in third place at 24%, with a 4% margin of error. While they have some presence in Quebec City and certain suburban areas, their overall performance in the province remains weaker compared to other regions. Without a major breakthrough in voter support, the Conservatives may struggle to win enough seats to make a significant impact in Quebec. The New Democratic Party, NDP, is polling at 8% with a 3% margin of error. Quebec was once a major NDP stronghold, especially after the 2011 Orange Wave. But in recent years, their influence has declined significantly. At these numbers, the NDP is unlikely to be a major player in the province and could risk losing what little representation they still have in Quebec. The Green Party of Canada, GPC, is polling at 3% with a 2% margin of error, indicating minimal influence in the province. They are unlikely to win any seats, but could play a small role in splitting progressive votes. With the Liberals leading and trending upward, they are in a strong position to secure the most seats in Quebec. However, the Bloc Québécois remains a serious challenger, and if their rural and nationalist support strengthens, they could tighten the race in key ridings. The Conservatives remain far behind, while the NDP and Greens are unlikely to be major factors. However, last-minute shifts among undecided voters could still impact the final seat count. Quebec remains one of the most important provinces to watch, as its unique political dynamics can influence the overall election outcome. Now let's turn our attention to Atlantic Canada, where the latest 338 Canada electoral projection as of March 16, 2025, shows some significant shifts in voter support. Liberals strengthen their lead in Atlantic Canada. The Liberal Party of Canada, LPC, is currently leading the region with 48% of the vote, holding a 7% margin of error. More importantly, the symbol indicates that Liberal support is on the rise. This is a strong sign that the Liberals are consolidating their position in key ridings across Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island. Atlantic Canada has historically been a Liberal stronghold, and with their numbers increasing, they are well positioned to retain control of the majority of seats in the region. Conservatives in second place, but facing a decline. The Conservative Party of Canada, CPC, is polling at 33% with a 6% margin of error. However, the symbol indicates that their support is declining. While the Conservatives remain the strongest challengers to the Liberals, this downward trend suggests that they may be losing momentum in the region. Their performance will likely depend on how well they can hold on to their rural and suburban support base, particularly in parts of New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, where they have been more competitive. The New Democratic Party, NDP, is polling at 12% with a 4% margin of error. The symbol signals a decline in NDP support, which could be concerning for the party as they have historically had strong pockets of support in areas like Halifax and parts of New Brunswick. If this trend continues, they may struggle to hold on to key ridings. The Green Party of Canada, GPC, is polling at 4% with a 3% margin of error, meaning they are unlikely to win seats, but could still impact tight races through progressive vote splitting. With the Liberals gaining ground and the Conservatives slipping, Atlantic Canada appears to be shifting further toward the Liberals. This could mean seat gains for the Liberals and a tougher path for the Conservatives, while the NDP's decline could further solidify Liberal dominance in the region. As Election Day approaches, this will be a key region to watch, particularly to see if the Conservatives can recover some lost ground or if the Liberals will continue to expand their lead. As we've seen, some parties are strengthening their hold, while others are still in a tight fight. But with margins of error, late campaign shifts, and voter turnout still in play, anything can happen. We'll continue tracking these numbers as Election Day nears. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to today's Blueprint News for the latest updates on the Canada 2025 election.